Welcome, everyone, to an incredible, extraordinary, fascinating episode of Living Theosophy here on Sunday night. This is a Sunday Night Live, meaning we are live with you in the chat. So though this was recorded earlier, we are there with you. All of us are there with you. Please comment, please, if you would, and share, like and share if you will. This is very valuable information. Tonight, we have one of our very, very own with us, the one and only Dr. Taposhri Ganguly. And this is a Blavatsky Lodge talk. We are all members of the Blavatsky Lodge. And this was a requested talk from Petra Meyer, and we're very excited for tonight. So let's get to it, shall we? Our very own Dr. Taposhri Ganguly, our beloved Taps, as we call her. She holds a doctorate degree in applied statistics and works at a management consultancy in London. Besides her day job as a statistician, which primarily requires her to build and explore human behavioral models, she feels an internal need to have a number or an equation for everything in life.
Taps is mostly consumed and fascinated by patterns all around in the world. She finds a unique strength in the interrelated and connected net of emotions, thoughts, and actions. Taps was introduced to Theosophy on a long-haul flight from London to San Francisco by a co-passenger who she sat next to. She left that conversation while disembarking from the aeroplane, not knowing that for years later, a series of incidents would lead her to the Secret Doctrine, the seminal work by HPB.
Taps associates the Secret Doctrine to home, to a sense of belonging, and to a knowing that she doesn't need words or numbers. At another level, she treats it as a thesis of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and finds it deeply fascinating to read and contemplate through it like an academic. Now tonight, we have our very own Taposhri Ganguly, Dr. Taposhri Ganguly, for the mathematical framework of the Secret Doctrine. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you. And that was a fascinating introduction. Thank you both, my favorite people, and this is my favorite channel. So I'm very, very happy to be back here. And I would like to start by thanking everyone for giving me this opportunity to share bits and pieces of my work, which I've been very openly talking about for almost a year now. And I would like to say that I am no expert. I am no expert in the Secret Doctrine, and neither am I any form of expert in mathematics. But I have a mad fascination for numbers, and I need to have an equation for nearly everything in life. And so it's a piece of work that has fascinated me for quite a while. So today I'm going to be sharing few results that and analysis that I have done on the texts of the Secret Doctrine. So I also hope not to bore you people so much, but I would definitely try and make it as interesting as possible. So
I wouldn't ever say it's boring. It's just really insightful. It's another way of looking at this information.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of interest in tonight's episode, a lot of interest, more so than ever before. And your previous one that we did together, there's been lots of views on that. And as you say, this is the channel that made you,
superstar.
Superstar. Well, everybody is anxious to see it. So we're looking forward to it, honey. I'm sorry to talk over you. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I think I'll share my slides now, and then I'll take things from there. Okay, so I have given a title to tonight's presentation. I've called it A Mathematical Framework of the Secret Doctrine. So what I'll be talking about is I'll be looking at the underlying emotions that the Secret Doctrine carries, the texts, right? So we all read the text differently. We all have different interpretations, different perceptions of the text, but the emotions, the human emotions, are quite definite in number. So what emotions do the text really carry for everybody, regardless of your age, your location, your ethnicity, your background? What are the emotions? Then I will be looking at how different or similar are the 7 stanzas of the Secret Doctrine. Right? Is it like all the stanzas convey completely different messaging, or is there an underlying commonality that we have through the stanzas? And then there was one stanza which I found while doing this work quite fascinating, and it kept coming back and back at me. So I had to give it some more time. And that was stanza 1. And I will talk a lot about stanza 1 as we go through the presentation today. But for stanza 1, I have looked at the 9 shlokas in particular to see what are the association that the shlokas themselves share within themselves, and how do they vary, how similar, how dissimilar they are. And then I have built a causal model, which is I think I'll explain a causal model when we get to it, because there's no point in explaining it right now and then confusing everyone. So we'll wait until we get to it. So I'll start with a quote by one of my favorite statistician, George Box, who said, "All models are wrong, but some are useful." And if nothing, I would like everyone to take this particular quote back with them at the end of the presentation, because models are built by humans and you're meant to make mistakes. You're meant to refine them as you learn and as you grow and as you increase your knowledge base, but they are useful. They are useful to add to your knowledge base. They are useful, in the way you contemplate and the way you look at things. So I would like everyone to take that quote away and contemplate, if nothing else from the talk, but I think there will be something else to take away as well. Now, there are 2 concepts that I want to mention up front. I don't expect everyone to memorize those, but I would just say them. So one concept is called, analysis framework is called sentiment analysis, which is primarily adding objectivity to texts and sentiments and natural languages. And the other framework is called Bayesian analysis, which is pretty much looking at the probabilistic relationship across different components in very simple terms, but we'll get to it. So it's just something that you can remember, just keep the 2 terms that with you. So let's start. So I've already said what is special about today, how we're going to look at the Secret Doctrine today. Now, it is also worth pointing out that there are many ways of expressing the texts of the Secret Doctrine. And tonight, the ways that you're going to be seeing in this talk might be very new for most people, but this is also a way of representing the texts of the Secret Doctrine. And one of the ways is to represent it in forms of zeros and ones. Now, you can ask why zeros and ones, but before you ask that, let me specify certain things. So what I did was I took all the 7 stanzas of the Secret Doctrine. The stanzas have their shlokas with them. So I just combined all the stanzas and all the shlokas, and I converted the text into binary digits. And now you can format it. So I looked at 7 shlokas. So I put the columns as the shlokas and the rows as the texts of the shlokas, of the stanzas, I'm sorry. So I have 7 stanzas, and then I have all the content of the stanzas expressed as zeros and ones. What you see in table 1 is just a small snapshot of the complete matrix, which is of 1, 2, 1, 2, 6 rows and 7 columns representing the 7 stanzas of the Secret Doctrine. Now, why zeros and ones? I could have represented them in a different way, but then zeros and ones give you all the nice mathematical formations or calculations that you would like to do. Now, zeros and ones, we also know that there is a frequency attached to each word. So when you break them down into 0 and 1, it is much easier to compute those frequency or the wave function. You could also do it with different coding system. We have ASCII or hexadecimals as well, but for this talk and this presentation and this piece of work, I thought binary was something that I could do it much more easily than the others. But it could also be a comparison that I get into at some point if I'm writing it or if I'm putting it as an article, then that comparison would help on how you model things in that way. So after having broken them down into this numerical format, what happens is, A, it gives you the foundation to compute, to do your computations. B, it also makes way, like if you put the context to it, it also puts you in a framework of sentiment analysis, which we will look at when we get to it. So Having put them into zeros and ones on the slides, you can see stanza 5, 6, and 7 being represented in form of waves. Now, this is just a small window that you can see as an example. So the signals demonstrate the pauses, the continuity, and the movement in time. And these kind of binary numeration, the binomial coefficients and the Fibonacci series have been found. They are found to have a close association with the words and texts in the literature because they are used to represent these patterns. But here what you see are these stanzas 5, 6, and 7 being represented in the form of a signal. And each of these signals, you can see that the patterns are quite different in the stanzas. So you could feel that maybe the stanzas are conveying messages which are different, or maybe the information that flows through these stanzas are different. We don't know, but we will definitely get to it. So a bit more on that. So here you have stanza 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And you can see the periodicity of each of the stanza. So each stanza here is the composition. So stanzas have all the shlokas in them. And what you see is what we read is that the visualization of the whole cosmos vibrating in rhythm, movement combined with pauses is what we see through the different stanzas of the Secret Doctrine as well. But in some of the stanzas, we can see that there are these peaks. So at certain points, we can see that there are these behavioral peaks and certain times that there is something that is happening, which is like, but each of those peaks are different for each of the different stanzas that we read in the Secret Doctrine. But the continuity is maintained. So just like life, it's not like a straight line, but there is a continuity. There are ups and downs, and there are all these different signals. And there are certain times which are like the behaviors which are visibly dominant in certain spaces at certain points in time. So now let's look at all the texts of the Secret Doctrine. I can bet you this is the only way you would ever see it on my slide. All the texts of Secret Doctrine put together as a word cloud. Now, when you create a word cloud, certain words clearly jump out and they stand out. And when I've put all the text, so this is like combining the entire book, the first part, the volume 1 of Secret Doctrine. And the words that stand out are 1, 7, doctrine, every will. So I basically took out the most frequent used words in the Secret Doctrine, and I have listed them out here. So it's 1, matter, 7, will, first, man, every, science, nature, life. Now you can stop and you can ask me, like, so what? We know that, these are the most frequently used words in the Secret Doctrine. We know that there is a vibration underlying the stanzas, underlying the shlokas, and so what? So the answer is that there is kind of an association. We know that there is an association with matter and 7 and first and man and every and nature and science. But what is the number of that association? That association can be quantified. So what is that quantity, right? And we look at I'll show you map of 2 associations, and then I'll talk about a possible connectivity, a space of combination. So this is a map of first association. So I found out that 1 is associated, I'm going to use the word association and correlation interchangeably, is associated with motion, nirvana, power, life, create, knowledge, cosmos, laya, manifestation, mother. Right. And the association of 1 with mother is the least at 40%. It's the maximum with life at 78%. And with all the other words, the association is 77%, except 7, which is 48%. Right? You could hold on to those numbers for a minute, but you can see that none of those numbers are 100%. They all are less. They all are positive, very high correlations, very high association, but it's not 100%. We look at another map of association with the word first. Now here I've highlighted first and forms because first and forms was the only pair that has an association of 94%, and all other associations are 78%. We still do not have 100% association. Now, if we look at one plausible map with association, so if we look at first to Saptaparna, which is like similar to 7, we all know that, and then from 7 going into 1. So this is possibly leading into all the possible, we can have different permutations and combinations with these associations. This is just one of the ones that I created. And you can see that you lead through one node is going to lead you to the other node with a certain relation, with a certain number, with a certain association, but it is never going to get you to the association of 100%. There is always an unmanifested part, an unexplained part. The association of any two words within the secret doctrine is never 100%. And I thought that was one of the most fascinating findings to find, because in statistics, you do have correlations which are very, very close to 1, getting to 9.99. But here, I could not find any correlation which is even close to 0.99. All I found close was to 0.94, which is between first and fourths. That's it. So this could possibly, when HPB wrote in the text that partial sums lead to infinity, but not to, you never really know what infinity is. There will always be, even if you go 94%, there was always going to be that 6% that is unexplained. Now, let's look at one of my favorite, which is the sentiment analysis. So what emotions do the texts of Secret Doctrine carry? And after running the code that I did in our programming language, I found out that Secret Doctrine, the whole of Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, is exceptionally high on trust, followed by anticipation, then followed by fear and joy. Sadness, anger, surprise, and disgust form a bottom section where some of these bucket into negative sentiments. However, if you look at the second graph at the bottom here, you can see that the Secret Doctrine really holds very high positive emotions or sentiments, however you would like to call it. So which means it doesn't mean that you need to study Secret Doctrine from cover to cover, wherever you pick up, whatever text you read from the Volume 1 of the Secret Doctrine, the possible or the likelihood and the probability of you ending with emotions or feelings of trust and anticipation is always going to be very high, as opposed to feeling fearful and disgusted by what is written in the Secret Doctrine. I know that we all feel that way. There is a lot of anticipation, there's a lot of trust, and there's a lot of, like a feeling like what's coming next, what's happening next. But I think we all know it, but I have just put some numbers and a structure to that feeling of knowing that it definitely conveys a more positive impact on any person who reads the book. So in terms of emotions, it carries a very high positive emotion. And this is also true for all these shlokas of Secret Doctrine. And I do not have the slides for the shlokas, but I did the shloka analysis separately. And some of the shlokas have no negative emotions in them. They are completely positive. Some do tend to exhibit a little bit of negativity, negative emotions in them, but that's fine because the overall dominant emotion of the book is extremely positive. Now comes to my favorite part, which I always wanted to answer, which is the exam question was, how different or how similar are the stanzas? Now, so the graph that you see, so the y-axis represents the combination of the stanzas that I've compared, and the green bars tell you like how dissimilar to how similar they are. That's how they go. The smaller the bar, the similar they are. The bigger the bar, the more dissimilar they are. So I found out that stanza 2 and 4 are very, very dissimilar, and Stanza 6 and 7 are extremely similar to each other. And the average distance across all these stanzas is 11%. Now, this number runs between 0 and 1 using the model that I've used. So if it is 0, it means these stanzas are quite similar. They are exactly same. If it's 1, they are highly dissimilar. They're not at all same. They're completely different. Now, 11% across 7 stanzas as an average tells you that there is some sort of a commonality that runs through all the stanzas of the Secret Doctrine. Because it is not a 50% different, it is not 70% different, it's not getting closer to 1, which are completely dissimilar. It is coming down to a little bit closer to 0. So it is around 11%. 11% is a very negligible amount of distance, considering that I have compared it, I have 36 different comparisons of the stanzas. So which speaks for itself that there is some sort of an underlying theme, an underlying commonality of knowledge that is being handed over to us, that is being given to us, and that is written in the Secret Doctrine. Now, here comes let's have a very quick look at what are the synopses of the stanza 6 and 7, which are said to be very similar. So stanza 6 indicates the subsequent stages in the formation of a world and brings together evolution of such world down to its 4th great period. So it talks basically about the formation. And then stanza 7 continues to look at the history, tracing the descent of life down to the appearance of man, and thus closes the first book of the Secret Doctrine. So one is looking at a historical account and tracing the history down, and one is talking about the formation of the world. So how similar are they? And so would you call them to be similar? I would leave that to you to decide, given the words, because the numbers say that they are pretty similar to each other in what they are talking about. Their distance isn't that great. They might appear different, but the underlying theme of these two stanzas are pretty much same. But the stanzas have shlokas as well. These are just the synopsis. And the ones which are different. Now, here is the most interesting part. So stanza 2 actually talks about the higher faculty, the intuition, and talks about the appeal. It says that, the Secret Doctrine doesn't need to be studied by the brain and the physical brain. You need to imply, you need to have this intuition. You need to, tap into the higher faculties to be able to understand and grasp what's written in there. And stanza 4 talks about the differentiation of the germ of the universe, talks about consciousness, divine powers, and manifestations. They are different. And if you look at it in a little bit more depth, they are different. One talks about a different kind of faculty, and one talks about consciousness. But there is an underlying theme, there is an underlying current that maps them. But in terms of numbers, they have the maximum difference between them. Now, stanza 1 has fascinated me quite a lot, and you will see it when we come to the end of it as to why it's so fascinating. And I would like to say at this point that none of these results, these are the results of the analysis that I've done, and none of these results are they just came through as a result of the analysis. So they were not they were not thought of. They were not something that I did think like, this is what I'm going to get as the results. No, I had no idea what I was going to get. I just blindly put it through a framework of analysis, which I thought would work. And these are the results that I've gotten. So I started comparing all the 9 shlokas of stanza 1. And again, on the y-axis, you see all the combinations of the different shlokas. And I found out that shloka 1 and 2 differ significantly, whereas shloka 7 and 8 are extremely, extremely similar. This is only for stanza 1. I could carry out and do it for all the other stanzas as well, just that I didn't have that amount of time to do it for this talk, but that might be something I would look at going ahead. Now, having looked at all these associations and all these distances, we found that there is a lot of association. There is a lot of difference and similarity. Some are similar, some are dissimilar. We know all these numbers. But can we really say that one is causing the other? We can't, because all we looked at was associations. All we looked at was correlations. So, but associations do not imply causation. There can be an association between the words. There can be an association in the way the things behave, in the information. There can be a relationship, but is it that one is causing the other? And for that, I went into building a causal model. Now, the reason why I did that, I'll tell you and I'll share that. It's because I want to know, as a writer, when HPB was putting these texts down, I know there are a lot of things like, the masters helped her and there was all this narrative that is there. But if I'm just coming as a complete cynical reader to the Secret Doctrine, and I'm picking it as an author's work, I want to know, if you have put all these stanzas in a certain sequence, is there a cause and effect that's going on? Is there something, is there an underlying, is something causing something? Is there an impact that is happening through one stanza to the other? There could be that there is nothing, there could be that there is something. So I decided to build a model and test it. My model revealed, this is one of the models, there could be like 10 or I don't know, there could be many different formulations to this, but this is my formulation for the day. My model revealed that there is a causal relationship between the stanzas 2 to 7. Now you can see here that, so these are the arrows are, so where the arrow is pointing. So stanza 2 is giving out information to stanza 7, stanza 2 is giving information to stanza 6, is giving information to stanza 5, is giving information to stanza 4, but it is not receiving any information from any of the stanzas. But stanza 3 is giving information to stanza 4, but is receiving information from stanza 6. And we could put this, like there were two equations that I picked out of just because I love them. One is stanza 5 is equal to 44% of stanza 2 plus 8% of stanza 4. Stanza 7 is equal to 50% of stanza 2 minus 9% of stanza 6. Now you could say, what the hell do these mean? But if you look at it, it is like in both the equations, you can see that stanza 2 is contributing quite significantly. And if we sum up the coefficients, that is 44 plus 8, we end up with 52, which is 7, and 50 minus 4, which is 41, which is 3. So we are in the plane of the magical numbers 3 and 7, which definitely have a lot of components related to the text that we have seen within the Secret Doctrine. Now, on a closer look at stanza 2, it says that it drives all the other stanzas of the Secret Doctrine. It emphasizes, and it is seen that it emphasizes on the intuition and higher faculties are highlighted within this particular stanza. The contribution of stanza 2 in comprehending all the other stanzas is quite high, resulting in the coefficients to toggle between 3 and 7, which is creating, manifesting, and organizing in order. So it basically shows, if I go back to my previous slide, it basically shows that without tapping into the higher faculties, the understanding or the causality or the causal relationship that we try to define through words by just studying the stanzas is not going to lead us anywhere, because their independent contribution is quite low. We need to tap into the higher faculties, which stanza 2 really points us to, in order to understand, comprehend, and contemplate, and on the other stanzas, stanzas from 3 to 7. Now, you could ask me, where did the stanza 1 go? And I'll tell you, because that was what was very fascinating, because stanza 1 did not come up in the causal model. It just stood separately. I'll show you. So this is a correlation map across all the different stanzas. You can see that the diagonal you can ignore because that is just the relationship of the stanza with itself. All the other ones, you can see the effect of stanza 1 to be quite negligible. 2 is quite positive and it goes on, but a lot of things are happening between 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. A lot of orange dots, a little bit of sky blue dots happening. So there is a relationship across the stanzas, but 2 is the one which is driving those relations into certain stanzas, and 1 has been completely missing. And why is that? So the missing stanza 1. So 1 came up in the side of the model, and it just didn't have any causal link. I did not force the link for this particular presentation, but the idea was what happened? Why did 1 not show up in the model, whereas all the other ones showed up? For that, I went to understand what is stanza 1. Because I did if you remember a few slides back, I showed you how the 9 shlokas of 1 differ. So there are differences within the shlokas. Some are very similar, some are very different. But why does it have no relationship to any other stanza? And then I read the synopsis of stanza 1. And it refers to as being very symbolic. And it refers to as the state of one all. It refers to as something that's unattainable. And it talks about the state of one all during pralaya, before the first flutter of reawakening manifestation. A moment's thought shows that such a state can only be symbolized. To describe it is impossible. And when I read that, I figured out that it is indeed impossible to describe it. I cannot put stanza 1 as something that is causing anything. I can talk about it in terms of negating, in terms of the shlokas that form stanza 1, but stanza 1 does not contribute, or it's beyond even, like, I wouldn't say even it's impossible and symbolized. I would say it's even mathematically impossible to put a number to stanza 1, because I tried it, I couldn't do it. It doesn't have a causal effect on any other stanza. And with that, I want to conclude by saying that the underlying emotions or sentiments that the text of the Secret Doctrine carry are positive. The causal model does show that the deep inner faculty is the one that is required to understand and perceive the texts. There are always partial sums that are to be realized and can be realized. However, the completeness has an unexplained component which cannot be measured or accounted for. The states that are described as symbolic or are said to be impossible to describe mathematically as well do not exhibit any variation and have no causal relationships defined. And with that, I would like to thank you, and I would like to thank everyone at my study circle at Blavatsky Lodge, especially Petra, Lyndon, and Anne. I love you. I don't have to say that. You know that I love you so much. And thank you for all your love, encouragement, and support. Thank you.
Oh my goodness,
Wow.
sweetheart. That was fantastic. Lyndon. Oh my gosh. We are so proud of you. That was extraordinary. That was fascinating. That was a unique look at it. I even took notes, but listen, you can tell this is your forte. You can tell you've got degrees in this, and you're taking, I don't know any other person who has ever done this with a sacred text where you're actually not only being able to dissect and go through it, but you're proving what it is that the texts themselves say. You're proving that they're talking about using the higher faculties for these to actually take place. This is absolutely brilliant. And again, the Blavatsky Lodge inviting you to come on, as I've said before many, many times, sweetheart, this is only the beginning of your journey. Only the beginning. Absolutely brilliant. Lyndon, what do you think about our buddy?
Well, I've just got so many questions, but I know this isn't the right place.
Yes, go on.
Well,
Go on, ask.
Is it, I mean, I'm blown away by the rapidity of the information that you've just put into our heads, but I think it's almost a lack of dexterity that I've got with these constructs that you've got. I just want to ask, when you convert text into binary during your sentiment analysis or any other analysis, how do you attribute a certain numerical value to any word or letter? How does that process happen? Just so I can understand this process by a tiny, tiny bit.
Yeah, so sentiment analysis is not with binary numbers. Sentiment analysis is with the words. So sentiment analysis, binary is only for the wave function to get the periodicity and the continuity, right? Because you can't get that with words. So which is why 1 and 0 come very handy. And, I showed you all the graph into the signals and the waves and to calculate the pauses and the movement. Sentiment analysis is done on the texts, on the words itself. So every word,
the pauses, the continuity in time and the movement of time.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Gotcha.
I was going to ask Taps also, we are all in a study group that studies the Secret Doctrine or reads it and then talks about it with other people. It's a journey that, you don't have to be in a group to study, but, and it's not an academic study, as Taps so brilliantly, and she illuminated that it isn't an academic study. It isn't, and it isn't something that can be sat down and read and say, okay, that's it, read the Secret Doctrine. In your understanding, Taps, with having this scientific mind, this mathematical mind, and studying this text like we do, we just sit and read it and contemplate it. What are your thoughts as your math comes through and proves that this is an extraordinary piece of work? What are your thoughts on this text? And while you're there in the chat, folks, while you're watching, please feel free to type something. Taps will be here, and comments. We'll get to We'll get to the comments as well. But Taps, what are your thoughts on the Secret Doctrine itself now that you've ran through a scientific, whatever you've gone through and you've actually
the method. So I personally, I know I talk a lot, but when it comes to reading, I want to understand. So there are two ways. I can understand it through my way, or the perceptions and how others, there are so many other texts which explain the Secret Doctrine, and it's everyone's individual perception, right? And then they kind of validate it and they go through experiences, and that's validated. That's fascinating. So it's fascinating to be a part of the study circle and understand those and share the experiences. But the scientific mind of mine wants to have these concrete mathematical numbers, so that I can hold on to the sentiments. Like, am I the only one who leaves the class in anticipation? I'm not, because that is exactly how I'm going to leave it, because that's what the author meant. And that is going to be true for me. It's going to be true for anybody who's coming in to read the Secret Doctrine. You would have a lot of trust in it, in what's written in it, but you will never ever leave it with a feeling of disgust, like completely disgusted with it. You will never leave that. And these were important bits and pieces and important milestones for me to be able to see that mathematically, because I feel it, but I need to have a number to be able to quantify it. So I put a structure to it. So that's the science of it. But I like the discussion because that helps us in understanding what's happening. And it's been there for so many years, and the people have done so much work and so much research on it, and they approach it from different point of view, right? So it's definitely quite fascinating to sit together and to be able to share and listen in.
I was just going to ask, this is just another way of understanding it, and it's not something that I can grasp, and as fluid and as explanatory as your talk is, I recognize that it is just a snapshot of, I don't know how long this took you to not put the talk together, but come to these statistics and this data. But I think what I'm trying to say is that everyone learns differently, and if this helps you learn in your way, this is going to help somebody else understand this text. We're all different. And I think that if this gives you a snapshot that you can understand, that I can't quite understand 100%, but it helps me, then that's great. I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, because really I feel like them. Yeah, I know that there can be people like me who would probably be more number driven, and they would probably want like something more tangible, say like, okay, now there's a 94% correlation between first and forms. And, these two words are correlated. And then when you come across the text of the Secret Doctrine, you can, that resonates, that you relate to it, that yes, first it was this, and then these were all the forms, and then you go into the formlessness, and and then that journey becomes much easier. So you can flow with that journey. Just then simply somebody coming and saying, well, you have all these forms, and then they kind of disintegrate, and then that becomes that. But for me, that number 94%, so there's always a 6% chance. You will never be 100%. So that is, and I remember Petra has mentioned it in so many times in the class that it's never like nobody reaches infinity. It's never 100%. And I wanted to find that for myself, just to feel like I know, there's infinity. And I have said it as well in statistics. No, you always get to infinity. You never, be there. But these were like written texts. So to be able to do it and to find the correlation never being equal to 1, not even close to 99%, was a big finding, because there's always that margin of unexplained error. Not error, I call it error statistically, but there's an unexplained part, which is you'll never be able to explain.
So that's ambiguity, or is that human interpretation, or is that lost? That
is just the unmanifested part. Just as we humans don't know what infinity is, we just say this tends to infinity, and how big is infinity? How do we get to it? We don't know. In statistics, we use the word error. We always say we can measure it, but not with absolute accuracy, because we don't know. So it is exactly the same concept within the text as well, that we can explain, but there will always be an unexplained component. I clearly showed you like how stanza 1 stood out in the causal model. Didn't come in and didn't fit in, whereas everything else was being driven by the inner faculty, which people talk about meditation. They talk about these meditative routines that one needs to do in order to understand the secret doctrine. And it is true. It is true. That is what the model shows. It is true. But there is a stanza 1, which basically starts the secret doctrine, which is symbolic in its nature, which is impossible to comprehend. And it doesn't show up mathematically as well.
And it stands alone.
It stands alone. It stands alone. It stands alone as the building block of something that is never manifested. So there is this unmanifested part, which we'll never know, because we are so busy in the other stanzas, trying to understand them, and then we have to use our inner faculty, our intuition, our mind, and memory, and all those kind of faculties of the human brain, and that it is beyond us to even comprehend. And mathematically as well, it doesn't cause. So that doesn't have a cause and effect relationship with the other stanzas. That stanza 1, it is there, So yeah, that's what I found, and I was like, oh my God, okay.
Oh my God, indeed. Would you say, Taps, that after doing all of this research and putting this together, that this is a validation for this textbook for humanity, which is what we call it? I call it that. Would you say that this is possibly a scientific validation for these sacred teachings, this ancient knowledge? What would you say is the diagnosis after you've done this? How would you, somebody's just coming along, you're here on Living Theosophy, and you're looking at this, what is the secret doctrine? What would you say to those people that are going, wow, this seems to have something to it? How would you describe what you've discovered?
Because I always feel that there is a mathematical rigor that is lacking within these sacred texts. So people come in, they put in their perceptions, and there is a debate, and there are lots of words, and there are a lot of, they kind of logically go through it, or there's a rationality to it that's added, and you debate it out. And that's beautiful. I'm fascinated by it. I can't do it. What I can do, and what really appeals to me, is a mathematical rigor. So because 1 + 1 is going to be 2, it's not going to be 3, and it's not going to be 3 in any other part of the world. It's still going to stand as 1 + 1 is equal to 2, and that rigor is something that I was kind of like, not that I was looking for it within the secret doctrine, but I don't know, because my entire journey into the secret doctrine was quite a fascinating one, and it just happened by chance. So I feel like this is kind of providing that coherent mathematical structure to the text, which it needs, because people kind of question it. They question it as a religious text. They question it as, is it even true? How do you know? Now everybody's experience is different, but the numbers and those emotions are going to be exactly the same for everybody.
We have mathematical proof now for the very first time. Now, for the very first time on this text. You mentioned a year ago when you first talked about this, what are your plans to take this math and sacred texts and science and statistics into the future? What are your plans next?
I don't know. So when I spoke about this on your channel, your channel only. And it was the first time I was like, okay, I want to do this mathematically. I want to prove that the secret doctrine, whatever it says, it's mathematically possible, right? And that was the only aim that I had. I didn't know, like I said, what I was doing. The framework of analysis is a very standard framework of analysis that I use even in my day job from time to time. And it's not something that I'm completely like creating out of the blue. It's something it's there, it's available, and everyone and anyone who wants to run these codes can do it. Now with this, I think it's pretty much like taking it forward. Like if I were to write an article, say for example, providing this concrete mathematical padding, if you like, to the secret doctrine text. It doesn't need my support, but if I had to do it, then I would like to probably extend a few more, models and compare, like write a proper research article of it, so that someone might be interested in doing it, or might read it, or find it useful, like I did.
Well, thank you so much for sharing it here with us. Again, these are familiar faces here on this channel. These two, we met because of this channel. We've become friends. We're now co-workers. We're volunteers together on Living Theosophy. And again, if you'd like to know more, Taps has her own channel, which is called UinDhi, and I will put the link down below. I believe there's much more coming for Taps with all of this. With the teachings in the math. It just always has been that way. And so we will be working together. You'll be seeing the three of us together. We're very good friends. We study together, we love together, and we produce these texts together. We don't love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We love.
We know what you mean.
But it is such an honor to have you here. And it was Petra from the Blavatsky Lodge, which we're all a member of, actually, who suggested this talk. And I really do think that you have such a valuable something to share, especially when you bring up things like the word oneness, one, and trust. You're able to bring these out without just looking at these words. And the big thing was when you said it must be the higher faculties must come into play.
Yeah.
This to take place. That has given me goosebumps upon goosebumps. Thank you, sweetheart, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Lyndon, any closing remarks?
No, I was just going to say that was the word cloud you're referring to, wasn't it? Where it's just there.
Yeah, the word cloud. Yeah, it's just there. It's one of the most used words. And then you look at one word, and then you see all these different components come together, and you're like, oh my God, really? Is that what she meant? And then you're kind of, you can only be. I think I heard this from Rekha Nahar from Philippines. She said this, that I know, and you have said it as well in some talks, that Blavatsky said that be humble when you don't know, and be more humbler when you know. And when I looked at the word cloud to when I actually looked at the relationships, I was like, there is nothing that I have to add to it, because it's just so self-sufficient, and it's come out of a mathematical framework. I didn't make it, so this is exactly what it is. It's just there. It's just a way of looking at it.
That's
a wonderful way of putting it.
Thank you.
It is. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the end of the video. Here we are backstage at Living Theosophy 2.0. So if you like the video, please subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when Living Theosophy has a brand new video. And there's lots of things happening here at Living Theosophy. And I, for a long time, didn't want to ask if you would like and subscribe, because I was trying to be humble. But without the algorithm, these teachings can't get out to where they need to be. So I'm going to say, please like and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you back here. I love you.